Thousands of years ago, across the planet, great civilizations rose up, leaving humanity with stunning architectural legacies, profound philosophies, and heroic stories that resonate to this day. We think we know everything about them, about the mighty pharaohs, the illustrious Roman emperors, or the brilliant Greek philosophers. But what if I told you that behind those glamorous pages of history, there are countless surprising facts, strange customs, and even unbelievable things that you may... When we mention ancient Egypt, familiar images immediately come to mind. The towering pyramids reaching for the sky, the mysterious hieroglyphics carved on stone, and especially the image of the powerful pharaohs, with their distinctive crowns and powerful eyes. And of course, we cannot help but mention Queen Cleopatra, a name that has become an eternal symbol of beauty, power, and mystery. She was the one who captivated even the most illustrious Roman generals, such as Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and is considered the last queen of a glorious Egypt. In common perception, she is the embodiment of this country, a native queen with pure Nile blood. But brace yourself for a fact that may surprise, even shock you. Cleopatra VII Philiptor, as she was known, was not actually a native Egyptian. Sounds too good to be true, right? An iconic Egyptian queen who was not Egyptian. But here is one of the most interesting facts confirmed by historians and archaeologists. Cleopatra was the last member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a dynasty with completely different origins, hailing from the faraway land of Macedonia, Greece. To unlock this mystery, we must go back more than 3 centuries before Cleopatra was born, to the sudden death of one of history's greatest conquerors, Alexander the Great in 323 BC. Alexander, who had built a vast empire from Greece to India, died without a clear heir. This led to a fierce power struggle among his senior generals, known as the Diadochi. In the division of power, Egypt, a fertile, wealthy land with a long-standing civilization and a strategic location, fell to Ptolemy Soter, one of Alexander's closest generals and childhood friend. Ptolemy Soter quickly saw Egypt's great potential. He proclaimed himself pharaoh and laid the foundations for a new dynasty that lasted nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty. Under their rule, Egypt not only maintained its prosperity, but also flourished. The capital city of Alexandria was built, becoming the foremost cultural, scientific, and commercial center of the ancient world, with the Great Library of Alexandria and the famous Pharos Lighthouse. However, although they ruled Egypt, the Ptolemies were Greeks. They brought with them the culture, language, and customs of the Greeks and Macedonians. In the palace, the official language was Greek. The high-ranking officials were all Greek, and they maintained a distinctly Greek way of life. In fact, to maintain the pure, royal bloodline, a common idea among ancient royal families, the Ptolemaic pharaohs often married their own siblings. This was a custom they had learned from the native Egyptian pharaohs before them, but for their own purposes, to maintain the Macedonian bloodline. For this reason, for many generations, although they ruled over Egypt, most members of the Ptolemy family did not speak Egyptian and maintained a Greek identity in their palaces. They considered Egyptian to be the language of the common people, and did not need to learn it. But Cleopatra was different. She was a rare and remarkable exception in her lineage. Not only was Cleopatra VII Philiptor the first of the Ptolemies to actually take the trouble to learn and master her native Egyptian, she was also a natural linguist, fluent in many other languages, perhaps as many as 9 or 10, including Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Ethiopian. This extraordinary linguistic ability not only enabled her to communicate directly with her subjects, but was also a powerful diplomatic tool, allowing her to negotiate with foreign leaders without the need for an interpreter, creating intimacy and trust. Cleopatra's study of the Egyptian language and adoption of the local Egyptian culture was not just a personal preference, it was a brilliant political strategy. She understood that in order to truly rule in Egypt facing the expansion of the mighty Roman Empire, she needed the support of the people. She cleverly presented herself as the incarnation of the goddess Isis, the supreme goddess of Egypt, and participated in traditional rituals. This helped her build the support and trust of the Egyptian people, something that many previous Ptolemaic pharaohs had failed to do because they were too far removed from the local culture. In doing so, she consolidated her power and position, trying to protect Egypt's independence from Roman domination. So Cleopatra, the icon of Egypt, was actually a Greek Macedonian. This fact does not diminish her greatness or her appeal. On the contrary, it highlights her extraordinary talent, intelligence, and adaptability. She was a woman who transcended the boundaries of her lineage, immersed herself in the culture she ruled, and did everything she could to protect her country. The image of Cleopatra, although not ethnically Egyptian, has become one of the most enduring and powerful symbols of ancient Egypt. She proved that identity and power come not only from blood, but also from deep understanding, extraordinary adaptability, and the art of supreme leadership. When we look at our wall calendar or our smartphones, the division of the week into 7 days seems obvious, an indispensable part of modern life. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday repeat themselves naturally. But have you ever wondered, why 7 days and not 5, 8, or 10? Where did this familiar time system originate? The surprising truth is that the 7-day week system we use today is not a random invention, but a great legacy of an ancient civilization that disappeared thousands of years ago, the ancient Babylonians. To understand why the Babylonians chose the number 7, we must go back to the 2nd millennium BC, to the fertile land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of many brilliant civilizations. The Babylonians were not only famous for their magnificent cities and strict laws such as the Code of Hammurabi, but also for being excellent astronomers and astrologers. They spent hours observing the night sky, meticulously recording the movements of celestial bodies, believing that the stars and planets held the secrets of human destiny and the world. It was these astronomical observations that led them to the great invention of the 7-day week. With the naked eye, the Babylonians could see 7 main celestial bodies moving across the sky: the moon, the sun, and the 5 other planets we know today: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These celestial bodies were considered gods or symbols of gods, each with a distinct influence on the days of the week. They noticed that the moon went through 4 main phases in a cycle of about 29.5 days. To simplify and synchronize with the observed cycles, they divided the lunar cycle into 4 equal parts, each of approximately 7 days. And this number 7 coincided perfectly with the number of wandering celestial bodies that they could observe in the sky. So the number 7 became a number with special, sacred meaning for them. Each day of the week was named after one of these 7 celestial bodies, and was also associated with a deity in the Babylonian pantheon. The first day was dedicated to the sun, associated with the sun god Shamash. The second day to the moon, associated with the moon goddess Sin, and so on. Mars, Nergal, Mercury, Nabu, Jupiter, Marduk, Venus, Ishtar, and Saturn, Ninurta. This division had not only a calendar meaning but also a profound astrological meaning. Each day was believed to have its own characteristics and influences, depending on the celestial body that ruled it. This Babylonian invention was later adopted and spread widely by other civilizations. First came the Jews, whose Bible story of God creating the world in 6 days and resting on the 7th day strongly reinforced the significance of the 7-day week, making it an integral part of their beliefs. Later, the Romans, in the process of expanding their empire and coming into contact with Eastern cultures, also adopted this 7-day week system, replacing their own inefficient 8-day week, Nundine. When the Romans adopted it, they renamed the days of the week after the Roman gods that corresponded to the celestial bodies. For example, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, from Tyr, Mars; Wednesday, from Woden, Mercury; Thursday, from Thor, Jupiter; Friday, from Freya, Venus; Saturday. It was this Roman system that later, with the rise of Christianity and the expansion of the Roman Empire, spread throughout Europe and then the entire world, becoming the global convention that we still use today. This fact about the Babylonians and the 7-day week is a surprising one because it shows the far-reaching influence of an ancient civilization that we usually only know about through dry history lessons. It proves that the Babylonians were not only excellent sky observers, but also had the ability to systematize those observations into a meaningful time system. Civilizations do not exist in isolation, but always exchange and influence each other. An invention from ancient Mesopotamia can become an indispensable part of our modern life. From looking at the stars, ancient people created a basic time structure, shaping the rhythm of life of billions of people around the world for thousands of years. So, every time you look at the calendar and see the 7-day week, take a moment to remember the ancient Babylonian astronomers. With their rudimentary tools and the night sky as their laboratory, they left us a great legacy, a testament to the human mind's relentless exploration and organization of the world. It is not only a surprising fact, but also a wonderful story of how ancient observations still shape our modern lives. When we think of ancient civilizations in Central America, such as the Maya, Aztecs, or Olmecs, what comes to mind? Perhaps majestic pyramids in the deep jungle, complex writing systems, advanced astronomical knowledge, or mysterious religious rituals. However, behind those great achievements and mysteries, there is another aspect, something that when heard can make you shudder. The ancient Maya had a sport, an ancient form of soccer, but not just entertainment, but also a bloody ritual where sometimes the price for victory was life. Yes, you heard that right. This sport, called the Mesoamerican ballgame, or pits in Mayan, was an integral part of the social and religious life of the Maya and many other civilizations in the region. It was not just a game, but an event with deep spiritual significance, reenacting the mythological wars between the gods, or the battle between light and darkness, life and death. Mayan ball courts were elaborately constructed, often located in the center of major cities, next to temples and plazas. They were eye-shaped with high-sloping walls on either side and a large stone ring placed in the middle of the wall, quite high off the ground. The ball used was usually made of solid rubber, quite heavy and bouncy. The rules of this game are very specific and require a high level of skill. Players are not allowed to touch the ball with their hands or feet. Instead, they must use their hips, elbows, or knees to move the ball. The main goal is to get the heavy rubber ball through the high-kicking ring, a task so difficult that scoring a single point can be considered the victory of the entire match. Imagine, with a solid, hard, and heavy rubber ball, controlling it with only the hips and knees requires incredible strength, dexterity, and willpower. Players often wear thick protective gear to minimize injuries, but serious injuries are still inevitable. What makes the sport most haunting and surprising, however, is the bloody ritualistic aspect that is associated with it. In many cases, the outcome of the match not only determines who wins or loses, but also who is sacrificed to the gods. What is frightening is that there is evidence that the winners, those considered the most honorable and powerful, are sometimes the ones chosen for the sacrifice. Why is this? Why should the winners pay with their lives? For the Maya, human sacrifice, especially of exceptional individuals like the winning players, was not an act of punishment, but of the highest honor. They believed that human blood was the most precious source of life to nourish the gods, ensuring that the sun would rise each day, rain down abundant crops, and maintain the balance of the universe. The sacrifice of the strongest and most talented people symbolized that people were offering their best to the gods, in exchange for the survival and prosperity of the entire community. The ballgame was often seen as a reenactment of a battle between the gods. When a team scored, especially by putting the ball through the hoop, it was not just a score but a sacred moment, a meeting between the human world and the divine world. Thus, the sacrifice of the winners could be seen as a supreme act of reverence and faith, a way to maintain the balance of the universe and the satisfaction of the gods. These ball courts were not only places for sports, but also giant temples where the boundary between life and death became most fragile. Archaeologists have found evidence of these rituals. In many Maya ball courts, especially at Chichen Itza, reliefs have been found depicting post-match sacrifices, often involving the beheading of players. Mass graves containing the remains of those believed to have been victims of these rituals have also been found near the ball courts. These evidences further support the theory of the bloody and ritualistic aspects of the sport. The truth about the bloody Mayan sport of football is a very surprising thing, because it breaks our stereotype of sports as entertainment. It proves that, for the Maya, sports were not just a pastime, but an inseparable part of their religious life and cosmology. Their concept of sacrifice was very different from ours. Sacrifice was not always a punishment, but sometimes an honor, a noble act to maintain the order of the universe. These civilizations not only had brilliant achievements, but also had customs and beliefs that we today may find horrifying, but were completely reasonable in their cultural context. So, when we look back at the history of the Maya, there is more than just profound knowledge or beautiful architecture. We also see a darker side, a sport where winning could mean death. This discovery not only amazes us about the ancient Maya, but also reminds us of the incredible diversity of human cultures and of the profound meanings that the most seemingly absurd actions can carry within a given historical and religious context. When we think of ancient Egypt, the first images that come to mind are the great pyramids, the magnificent temples, and the colossal structures that have stood the test of time. To build these wonders, we often imagine a huge workforce, including thousands of slaves, working under the whips of overseers, without a voice, without rights, only obeying the pharaoh. A society with an absolute power structure, where everyone obeyed the will of the god-king. However, there is a surprising fact, a discovery that shatters all our preconceptions about ancient Egyptian society. This fact shows that, even in a civilization with such highly centralized power, workers had a voice, and they used that voice to fight for their rights. They organized strikes. Yes, you heard right. The concept of strike, a form of labor struggle that we often think of as only appearing in the industrialization period, existed thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt. The most famous strike, and one of the earliest recorded strikes in human history, occurred in 1159 BC during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III. The site of the strike was Deir el-Medina, a unique village located on the west bank of the Nile, near the Valley of the Kings. The village was home to skilled craftsmen and their families who were responsible for building and decorating royal tombs. It is important to emphasize, these craftsmen were not slaves. They were professional, highly skilled workers who were paid in food, water, and other goods. At the time, Egypt was going through a difficult economic period. State grain stores were depleted, and as a result, the workers in Deir el-Medina were not receiving their monthly rations of grain on a regular basis. For those who depended on grain to feed themselves and their families, this meant starvation. They waited patiently, but when the situation did not improve, their patience ran out. One fateful morning, instead of going to the construction site as usual, the workers decided to take action. They gathered, marching from their villages to temples and state granaries, shouting their protests. Inscriptions on pottery fragments, ostraka, and papyrus from the period describe the event clearly. They declared, "We are hungry, we are hungry, we are thirsty, we have no clothes, we have no fish, we have no vegetables." This was not an armed rebellion, but an organized and peaceful strike. They did not riot or cause destruction, but simply refused to work. They knew that their work was vital to the pharaoh and the construction of the tomb, and that this stoppage would put pressure on the authorities. The workers sat on strike in front of the temples, and when officials came to ask why, they frankly expressed their dissatisfaction. This strike lasted for several days, and it caused a great upheaval in the Egyptian administrative apparatus. Finally, under pressure from the workers and realizing the importance of completing the royal works, the officials gave in. They provided the missing food rations and promised stability in the future. This was an incredible victory for workers, proving that even in a centralized society, their rights could be protected through solidarity and struggle. The truth about the strike in ancient Egypt is a surprising one because it completely breaks our stereotype of a completely passive slave society. It shows the complexity of Egyptian society. Egypt was not just about pharaohs and slaves. There was also a class of skilled workers who were essential and powerful enough to put pressure on the government. The concept of labor rights. Even thousands of years ago, the awareness of basic rights of workers, such as being paid in full and on time, existed and were protected. The power of solidarity. The strike demonstrated that when a group of people unite and act together, they can achieve seemingly impossible things, even in a society with a very rigid power structure. The story of the workers of Deir el-Medina is not just a dry historical record. It is a living testament to the human spirit of struggle, the desire for justice, and the right to live with dignity. It reminds us that in any era, in any social context, the voice of the working people is always powerful, and solidarity is always the key to achieving change. This is not only a surprising fact, but also an inspiring story from thousands of years ago. When we think of the Roman Empire, we often imagine a powerful civilization with talented engineers who built monumental structures like the Colosseum, great aqueducts, and a complex legal system. They were known for their fierce warriors, brilliant philosophers, and a lifestyle that emphasized luxury and sophistication. The Roman public baths are a testament to their attention to hygiene and relaxation. However, behind that flashy and civilized appearance, there is a hidden truth that when heard may make you frown, even feel a little disgusted. A truth about a personal and industrial hygiene habit that the ancient Romans applied in a very normal way. They used urine to rinse their mouths and wash their clothes. Yes, you heard correctly. It was urine. It may sound strange and unbelievable in this 21st century, but for the ancient Romans, the use of urine was not only a strange custom, but also a very practical and scientific, in their understanding, method of solving hygiene problems. So why did they do it? The secret lies in a chemical compound found in urine, ammonia, NH3. Fresh urine initially contains urea, but when exposed to air and bacteria, urea quickly breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia is a strong alkali, making it an effective cleaning and whitening agent. Think of today's household cleaning products, many of which still use ammonia as a key ingredient. The Romans, although not aware of the molecular structure of ammonia, recognized its powerful cleaning properties through practical experience. The most important role of urine was in the laundry industry. Public laundries, called phylonica, were an integral part of Roman life. Here, washerwomen, or fullers, would collect urine from public toilets or from vats placed in the streets. They would then soak dirty clothes in large vats filled with urine and stomp on them with their feet. The ammonia in the urine would effectively remove grease and dirt and whiten fabrics, especially wool and linen. This process not only cleaned but also softened the fibers, making the clothes brighter. Urine was used for more than just laundry. The Romans used diluted urine as a mouthwash. The reason was similar. Ammonia has antibacterial and whitening properties. Although we have toothpaste and mouthwashes today, in ancient times, before modern hygiene products were invented, urine was considered an effective solution. Some even believed it could help protect teeth from cavities. Roman poets such as Catullus and Martial alluded to the use of urine to whiten teeth in their works, suggesting that it was a fairly common practice. What's more, urine was so important to the Roman economy that it was taxed. Emperor Vespasian, reigned 69 to 79 AD, was the one who imposed a special tax on the collection of urine from public toilets. When his son Titus expressed his disgust at the tax, Vespasian held up a coin and said, "Urine has no smell." This became a famous saying, meaning that the origin of money was not as important as its value. This showed that urine was not just a common detergent, but also an important economic resource, contributing to the empire's budget. So what does this say about the Romans? It shows that they were an extremely practical and inventive people. They were not afraid to use what was available in their environment to serve their daily needs, even if it seemed strange by modern standards. They understood the basic chemical properties of materials through experimentation and experience, and applied them effectively in their lives and production. This fact challenges our notions of civilization and cleanliness. It reminds us that the definition of hygiene and social acceptability has changed a lot over time and across cultures. When we look back at history, we see more than just great works and famous battles. We also see aspects of everyday life, customs that may seem surprising today, but were perfectly reasonable and necessary in their historical context. The story of the Romans using urine to wash clothes and rinse their mouths is a perfect example of the diversity and surprise of ancient cultures. When we think of ancient Indian civilization, what comes to mind? Perhaps the profound philosophies of Buddhism and Hinduism, the vast collections of Vedas, or the great achievements in mathematics with the concept of zero and the decimal system. We know India as a cradle of ancient culture, spirituality, and knowledge. But there is another aspect of this civilization, less known but equally groundbreaking and impressive. The remarkable developments in the field of medicine, especially surgery, and even more astonishingly, cosmetic surgery. Would you believe that thousands of years ago, when Western civilization was still in the early stages of medicine, doctors in India performed complex surgeries, including interventions that we now call cosmetic surgery? This is not a legend, but a fact clearly recorded in their ancient medical texts. The man who laid the foundation for these remarkable advances was a legendary but real person, Sushruta, a physician who lived around the 6th century BC. That's over 1,500 years ago. He is known as the father of surgery and is the author of the famous medical text, Sushruta Samhita. This book is not only a treasure trove of medical knowledge, but also a detailed guide to surgical techniques, describing over 300 procedures and over 120 different surgical instruments. What has astonished modern medical historians the most in the Sushruta Samhita is the detailed description of the technique of nasal reconstruction, also known as rhinoplasty. Today, rhinoplasty is a fairly common procedure, but imagine the time when there was no modern anesthesia, no antibiotics, and limited knowledge of anatomy. So why did rhinoplasty become necessary in ancient societies? At that time, the nose was a very vulnerable part in wars, quarrels, or even punishment. For example, cutting off the nose was a common punishment for criminals or those who were considered unfaithful. For a person, losing a nose not only affects their appearance but also causes deep social inferiority. Sushruta described an extremely sophisticated nose reconstruction technique. Step 1, he would use a leaf or a piece of paper to make a mold of the patient's nose. Step 2, then he would take a leaf-shaped piece of skin from the patient's forehead, keeping the base attached to the eyebrow area to ensure blood supply. This is the pedicle flap technique that modern medicine still uses. Step 3. This piece of skin would be sewn and shaped into a new nose. Step 4. To shape and keep the nose from deforming, Sushruta will use 2 small tubes, usually bamboo or wooden tubes, inserted into the nostrils, and then covered with a layer of herbal powder or cotton to fix it. Step 5. After surgery, the patient will be bandaged and carefully monitored. You may wonder, how did they perform these surgeries without the anesthetics we use today? Sushruta and other ancient Indian physicians used natural anesthetic herbs to relieve their patients' pain. Furthermore, they paid great attention to the hygiene of their instruments and surgical sites to minimize the risk of infection, a basic principle that Western medicine would not truly recognize until thousands of years later. Apart from nose surgery, Sushruta Samhita also describes many other procedures such as removal of tumors and abscesses, cataract surgery by using a special needle to push the cloudy lens aside to restore vision, reshaping of ears and other body parts, technique of suturing wounds using needles and threads made from natural materials. The fact that plastic surgery was practiced in ancient India is a testament to their superior medical skills compared to many other civilizations of their time. It shows a deep understanding of anatomy, sophisticated surgical techniques, and a humanistic mindset about improving the quality of life for those who were injured or disfigured. This was centuries ahead of its time, when surgery in the West was very primitive and often limited to amputation or bone setting. It was not until the 18th and 19th centuries that similar techniques of Sushruta were rediscovered by Western physicians through translations and records. So, when we look back at history, there are not only ancient temples or profound philosophies, but also ancient operating rooms where physicians transformed the lives of the unfortunate. This discovery not only amazes us about the level of ancient Indians, but also reminds us of the limitless potential of human intelligence, transcending all limits of time. When you think of ancient Greece, what comes to mind? Perhaps great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, mathematicians like Pythagoras, poets like Homer, or athletic Olympians, we tend to picture a society where philosophical debates raged, where epic wars between city-states like Athens and Sparta shaped history, and where fierce warriors were revered. The image of Greece, with its shield and spear-armed hoplites ready for battle, has become a permanent part of our consciousness. However, here's an interesting, even somewhat surprising fact that few people know. In many ancient Greek city-states, ordinary people were not allowed to carry weapons in public. Yes, you heard that right. A civilization famous for its wars and legendary warriors had quite strict laws on weapon control. To understand the reasons behind this, we need to look deeper into the social structure and political ideology of the Greek city-states, especially Athens, the cradle of democracy. In contrast to the image of Sparta as a highly militarized society, Athens and many other city-states placed great importance on law and order. Their goal was to build a community where all citizens were equal before the law and could participate in public life without fear of violence. Historians and scholars have found ample evidence of these laws. For example, in his book The Constitution of the Athenians, Aristotle mentions regulations prohibiting the carrying of weapons in the agora, the center of public life in Athens. What was the main idea behind these laws? It was the belief that law and reason should be supreme, not force or the threat of weapons. A famous saying, though later developed by the Romans from a Greek idea, sums up this spirit perfectly. In the arms of arms, the law is silent. The ancient Greeks believed that if a society allowed people to freely carry weapons, especially in public places such as squares, markets, or democratic meetings, it would lead to chaos, violence, and the law of the jungle would replace the law. When someone took up arms, the threat of violence would overwhelm reason and fair debate. Furthermore, in a democracy like Athens, where every citizen has the right to speak and participate in important city decisions, allowing the carrying of weapons would create inequality. People with weapons could easily intimidate or impose their opinions on others. Therefore, to ensure a fair and safe environment for debate, voting, and other social activities, gun control is essential. It helps maintain social order and ensures that citizens' rights are exercised equally. Of course, this does not mean that the ancient Greeks were completely unarmed. They were brave warriors when necessary, and military training was an important part of civic life for men. Wars between city-states were inevitable. However, when not in a combat situation, when not on military duty, a Greek citizen was expected to live a civil life, obey the law, and not pose a threat to those around him with weapons. They understood that the line between a militarized society and a liberal democracy was very thin, and that gun control was one way to maintain that line. This fact about gun control laws in ancient Greece is surprising because it breaks our stereotypes of a civilization that is often associated with war and militarism. It reveals a more subtle and profound aspect of Greek thinking about social organization. They realized that in order to build a just, stable, and democratic society, the control of physical force through the control of weapons was necessary to give priority to the power of reason and law. When we look back at history, we see not only glorious victories and great works of architecture, we also see the quiet efforts of legislators, philosophers, and citizens to build an orderly society where rights and duties were balanced. This discovery not only surprises us about the ancient Greeks, but also reminds us that debates about the role of weapons in society have existed for a long time, even in civilizations that we often think of as completely different from our own today. We have been on a journey of discovery, revealing fascinating facts behind ancient civilizations. From Cleopatra not being Egyptian, to Romans using urine to wash clothes, to advanced Indian medicine, Greek gun control laws, Egyptian strikes, Babylon's 7-day calendar, and the bloody Mayan soccer. Each story reveals a unique, even unbelievable aspect of the past. These discoveries remind us that history is more than just dry facts and figures. It is a vibrant, colorful canvas where human ingenuity, creativity, and even strange customs are displayed throughout the ages. No matter how different they were, they are still our ancestors, the ones who laid the foundations for the modern world. Want to learn something new every day? This channel is for you. Subscribe to get the latest tutorials and lessons.